Before we get into the video, just a little heads up. The answer to a lot of the rhetorical questions I'm going to be asking is kinda. That being said, let's get right into it. It's a question that's plagued internet forums and bro scientists for years now. Is Adderall just meth? The answer is kinda. Let's take a look at the two. This is the chemical structure of Adderall, and this is the chemical structure of methamphetamine. Now, these drugs look nearly identical on a chemical level, and in fact, they actually act almost identical on a pharmacological layer too. The only actual difference between Adderall and methamphetamine is the addition of the methyl group. Now, what this actually means is basically it's just able to hit your brain harder and faster. This is because whenever you add the methyl group, you dramatically increase the drug's efficacy. Efficacy is just the maximum effect that can be achieved by a drug. For example, cocaine has a far higher efficacy than caffeine as a stimulant. In other words, no matter how much caffeine you took, you couldn't match the efficacy of cocaine. At some point, the dose that you take doesn't matter anymore, it levels off. And that's the drug's maximum efficacy. In the case of methamphetamine, and this is a little bit of an oversimplification, it has about a 5 times higher dopamine release, 3 times higher serotonin release, and a 1.6 times higher CNS penetration. So since methamphetamine causes a 5 times higher dopamine release, you're going to get way more neurodegeneration. In this context, neurodegeneration is mostly caused by that release of dopamine. Whenever you have those really high, especially sustained releases of dopamine, and there's too much of it, it's just going to kill those cells over time. They can't handle that much. But the important distinction is this is only a 1-to-1 dosage of Adderall to methamphetamine that we're comparing, but that's not how they're really used. If you didn't know, Desoxyn is a prescribed medication for ADHD and obesity treatment in America, but it's actually just methamphetamine. People like to say, like, oh, this is just like meth, this is just like meth. It is literally methamphetamine, like not a different form, not a different type. It is meth. It is literally just meth. It's prescribed. It's not crazy common, but it is a real thing. It's FDA approved. I'm not kidding. You can look this up. One of the benefits with using Desoxyn, or methamphetamine though, is you can use a lower dose and achieve similar effects as you would from something like Adderall. To explain a little better, I'll give you this kind of oversimplified explanation. Imagine for a second that the typical dose of Adderall was 100 milligrams. Since methamphetamine is 5 times as efficacious as Adderall in terms of dopamine release, you could take 1/5 of the dose and achieve the same dopaminergic effect. However, you might also experience fewer side effects, like for instance cardiotoxicity or problems to your heart or sleep disruption or something else. This is a very important consideration whenever comparing Adderall to methamphetamine or any other prescription or non-prescription drug. But now it's time for my favorite part, pharmacology. This part is a little technical, but kind of the goal of this channel, at least for now, is to make this kind of information accessible to just the everyday person, this deep kind of pharmacology stuff. So if you want to skip forward, there's going to be chapters below. You can do that, but I'm going to try to make it understandable to an average person. By the way, whenever we're talking about pharmacology, I might refer to Adderall as amphetamine because that's its primary ingredient. It's a mix of 2 types of amphetamines, and methamphetamine I'm just going to refer to as methamphetamine or meth. When you ingest Adderall, it goes into your stomach, dissolves, passes through the kidney mostly unchanged, and then hits your bloodstream. In your bloodstream, it hits the hepatic portal vein. Then it will reach the blood-brain barrier within just 60 minutes. The blood-brain barrier is an important part of your body. Basically, it just protects all these random molecules that are floating around your bloodstream from hitting your brain. Your brain's really important, so your body doesn't want just anything hitting it. Psychoactive substances, like for instance caffeine, alcohol, Adderall, illicit substances, anything, all of that is in your bloodstream and it passes the blood-brain barrier. The way that your blood-brain barrier actually works is it's basically just a bunch of cells that are packed really closely together. If the molecule is small enough, it can just pass right through in between. Different things can impact how well it penetrates the blood-brain barrier, like for instance if it's fat soluble, if it's hydrophilic, if it's hydrophobic, etc, etc, etc. Amphetamine is a pretty small molecule and it's also lipophilic, so it passes right through the blood-brain barrier pretty well. Now that it passed the blood-brain barrier, it's actually inside of your CNS, or central nervous system. Once it's there, the first thing it does is it starts looking for a protein called DAT. DAT is a dopamine transporter that's in the membrane of dopaminergic receptors. Ordinarily, DAT's job is to pull dopamine out of the synaptic cleft, which is the space between 2 neurons. It takes that dopamine and recycles it back into the system so it can be released again. Once amphetamine finds DAT, it doesn't actually get sucked in kind of like dopamine would. Instead, it actually reverses the function of DAT. So instead of pulling in dopamine, it starts pushing it out. Dopamine is normally stored in these membrane-bound packages called vesicles. Vesicles are normally sealed and protected, and they're maintained by a transporter called VMAT2. VMAT2 uses a proton gradient, which pulls in dopamine and keeps it locked inside. Amphetamine disrupts that proton gradient, and the vesicle starts to leak. dopamine spills into the cytoplasm of the neuron. Now the DAT, which is still working in reverse, keeps pumping that back into the system. Now the end result of this is those receptors never stop receiving dopamine. And it does a very similar thing to norepinephrine, which is a fight or flight hormone. Now let's add the methyl group. We've taken amphetamine, or Adderall, and turned it into methamphetamine. The mechanism itself doesn't fundamentally change. You still have the same DAT reversal, you have the same effect on norepinephrine, etc, etc, etc. The only thing that actually changes is its journey. The methyl group takes that amphetamine molecule and makes it even more lipophilic. This means it's even easier for it to pass the blood-brain barrier. In addition, more total molecules are also able to pass the blood-brain barrier, which the end result of which means you have a higher peak, and that peak comes faster. Imagine it like this. Imagine your blood-brain barrier is kind of like the CIA or some like secret organization. Adderall only has a level 1 access card, so it can get into some buildings, but it takes extra security checks. Methamphetamine has a level 3 badge, so it can get in anywhere really quickly. The downside with methamphetamine is that it produces these reactive metabolites. Metabolites are what that methamphetamine gets broken down into. These metabolites cause oxidative stress to dopaminergic and serotonergic neurons. In addition, at very high doses of methamphetamine, you can get neural hyperthermia, which is whenever your brain is literally overheating. This will also damage neurons in your brain. But the thing is, Adderall does this too. The main thing that causes neurodegeneration is excessive intracellular dopamine release. PET imaging of longtime methamphetamine users shows a decrease in DAT density. Some of this will recover with abstinence, but some of it will not. Amphetamine can do this too, but it's mainly at high doses and over long periods of time. So now that we've looked at the pharmacology of everything, what do I really think? Is Adderall really just meth? Kinda? Now look, on the one hand, there is obviously a big chemical difference. That methyl group isn't just a small, innocuous thing. But in terms of societal harm, there is a big difference. In 2023, Adderall was the 15th most prescribed medication in the country, and rates of prescription for amphetamine-based ADHD treatments are just going up every year. They're also being prescribed to younger and younger children with still developing brains. And because of how common and accepted it's become, it's one of the most, if not the most, abused prescription medications in the country. While people might be quick to cite studies saying that amphetamine-based medications, when used normally, are not neurotoxic, I'm skeptical. Personally, I think 10-20 years down the line, we're going to get a lot of longer-term safety studies, and we're going to see that these medications can in fact be neurotoxic even at therapeutic doses. But also I acknowledge that ADHD can be very difficult to deal with, and I see how these medications are so appealing. It's a very deep and nuanced topic, and this is not a comprehensive deep dive. But I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you watched this far into the video, thank you. If you want to subscribe, you can. Thank you for watching.